Hi, this is Captain Everyman, and I'm here today to focus my superpowers, clarity, insight, and perspective on the MCU movie, Captain Marvel. And let me say from the very start, there will be spoilers, and I'm not going to hold anything back. This movie, Captain Marvel, was a very flawed and frustrating movie for me. One of the frustrations I had was I see how well it did box office wise, and lets me know what a burden my superpower clarity is, because I've got clarity on this movie that others don't seem to have. I came into this movie with a blank slate. I didn't know who Captain Marvel was. Captain Marvel to me was always Billy Batson, and of course this was not Billy Batson, and I didn't know anything about Carol Danvers. So I was going to this movie not knowing anything. I hadn't heard any spoilers, so I was ready to soak it up and enjoy the ride. And unfortunately, I came back out of this movie still not knowing who Carol Danvers was, because one of the big flaws with this movie was character development. I think of all the other MCU movies I've seen, and I had a feel for who these people were, and I could relate to them by the time the movie was over, but I couldn't do that with Carol Danvers at all. And I think to show how weak this is, I saw a trailer for another movie, which was Shazam, and I had a feeling I knew who that character was just from the trailer, but I saw this whole movie and never connected with Carol Danvers at all. I never felt like I really knew who she was. She was like a generic fighter pilot, was about all I got from this movie. And that was sad, because I was ready to really enjoy it, and what's really sad and tragic about it is she was a character tailor-made for us to connect with. She was one of us. She was just a normal human being who, and I know she's not the only one like this, but she became the reluctant hero twice in the same movie, and still I didn't get to connect with her, which shows that she was mishandled more than anything. The movie seemed really thrown together and rushed to me, and I can't help but think that that was really true somehow, because it came across that way. It had kind of a fan fiction quality to it, and I can't explain what that is, but sometimes in fan fiction they try to sort of throw too much together, and they try to connect with other established material in kind of like flippant ways or whatever, and this movie was like that. And one of the things they did here that I think really showed was there was too much Nick Fury in this movie. I mean, was this movie about Captain Marvel, or was it about Nick Fury? It seemed like they could never decide, the people who made this movie couldn't decide which was which. And I think we already knew Nick Fury well enough that we could have just backed off of him here and given Captain Marvel and Carol Danvers like the stage and just got to know her, because they left too much character development out for them to worry about Nick Fury. And you think about how her story begins, they try to connect that to other things like Guardians of the Galaxy, and it just took up too much time. It was too like jam-packed with stuff for us to get. It was like jammed with the Tesseract and its sort of legend and history, and Carol Danvers and Captain Marvel just got sort of squeezed out to me. One of the things too I didn't like was this transition from her being this Kree warrior and to being Captain Marvel was just too fast. I mean, most of these superheroes, let me give you a good example, would be Iron Man. Sure, he came out of the cave as Iron Man, but he built it up to being the high-tech, like man-machine hybrid that he was ultimately over time. And we got to watch that transition, and that's part of any origin story. Well, with this, it was like she was just suddenly there, and it made no sense to me. It didn't work for me. It was much too abrupt and too abbreviated for me to connect with it. And there were a lot of like strained and disjointed plot points also in this movie. One was how the little girl was like encouraging her mother to go die. And I'm in the theater thinking, huh? Because, you know, you don't see her father anywhere. You don't see any other support anywhere even. And so she ain't going to encourage her mother to go die in this battle, when I'm sure there's other pilots around in the Army and the Air Force, in the Marines, whatever, who could have taken this mission. There's no reason for this single mother with a daughter to go up there in this mission and risk her life. It made absolutely no sense at all. Then another thing, this movie opened was a flood of like recon issues. I mean, it is completely unbelievable that Nick Fury wouldn't have called on Captain Marvel when Ultron was going nuts. Why wouldn't he have called? Or when the Battle of New York was taking place, an invasion from outer space, wasn't she tailor-made for that? Wouldn't she have been able to help them there? He had no idea what the outcome of that. It looked like the end of the world to them, I'm sure. So to think that he wouldn't have called, I mean, this movie just opened like these floodgates of issues that made no sense at all. Why would he have not called her? It made no sense. Then we think about how Captain America is portrayed as the first Avenger. But really, isn't Captain Marvel now the first Avenger? When he starts the project, he even names it after her. So really, does that make sense anymore? I mean, that's probably just one of many we could look at and say, well, she's created all these issues here that don't make sense. With Ronan too, in a way, because she interacted with him. I mean, wouldn't she have been aware of what he was doing if she's really trying to stop the Kree from taking over and all that? In Guardians of the Galaxy, wouldn't Captain Marvel have found out about what Ronan was doing and tried to do something about it? I guess not, because she didn't show up. But there's all these, this is like a can of plot hole worms they just opened. And a can of retrocon effects they opened, and there was no reason for it to me. They could have sort of just steered away from that, but they just sort of just grabbed the can and like ripped it open here, and it didn't make any sense to me. There's some tweaks I think could have made this movie so much better. For one thing, we could have had a longer flashback of her past and gotten to know her, but they didn't do that. And why? Because they didn't give themselves time, really, because they crammed the movie with all these other things, like I said. We needed more of Captain America just in general. We needed better directing, I think, and better writing. I mean, just a little bit of what I've seen from the in-game trailers. To me, Brie Larson looks a whole lot better and more believable, and I feel like I'm connecting to her more in the in-game trailers than I did in her whole entire movie. And people don't think of it, but a director is really sort of responsible to a large extent to how the actors come across on stage, because they're the ones watching. They're the ones that can motivate them, pump them up, and direct them in different ways to get the kind of performance out of them they want. And that's one of the reasons you see certain actors and certain directors work together so much, because they seem to bring out the best in each other. Whereas it just didn't work. The chemistry wasn't there at all. Brie Larson seemed flat, and I have to blame the directors for that and the writing for that as much as I do anything. So this is my review of Captain Marvel. This is the lowest rating I've ever given an MCU movie, and I have to give it a solid 6. I mean, it was slightly better than average, but that's not acceptable relative to the other work they've done, and that just was very disappointing to me. But I look forward to seeing Captain Marvel in Endgame, because I do like the character a lot, but the way she was portrayed and crafted in this movie just didn't do it for me at all.